The Heian era is one of the most important periods in Jujutsu Kaisen, and it's also one of the most layered. A lot of what happened during this time isn't handed to us directly. Instead, it's scattered across history lessons, character backstories, and brief mentions spread throughout the series. To understand what really went down, you have to piece together the events, the evolution of Jujutsu, and the people who shaped the era. Once all of that is connected, the Heian era starts to look less like a vague legend and more like the foundation of everything that follows. The best way to get there is by first understanding what this era actually was. The Heian era was a real historical period in Japan that lasted around 400 years, stretching from the late 700s to the late 1100s. In real history, it's remembered as a high point for Japanese art and poetry, the creation of katakana and hiragana, and the widespread establishment of Buddhism as a major religion. This era also marked the final stage of Japan's classical period, which means life back then was nothing like the modern world. Daily life was harsh and unstable, food shortages were common, diseases spread easily, and most people didn't live very long. The overall environment was heavy with fear, stress, and suffering. That constant negativity mattered a lot, because in Jujutsu Kaisen, negative emotions are exactly what fuel cursed energy. With so much negativity in the air, cursed spirits appear far more frequently and in far greater numbers than they do in the present day. That forced Jujutsu sorcerers to become stronger just to survive. The average sorcerer in this era had to fight constantly, which naturally pushed their abilities much further than modern sorcerers who live in a more stable world. Long before Jujutsu became refined, ancient shamans were already sensing and interacting with cursed energy. Living in a time filled with war and superstition, they relied on raw and imperfect methods. Their exorcism involved rituals, sacrifices, and charms rather than polished techniques. Even so, these early practices formed the base of what Jujutsu would later become. Early sorcery was way more about spiritual belief, with sorcerers focused on calming down or driving off curses instead of actually controlling them. As time went on, these rough methods evolved into powerful curse techniques. Many of the techniques in sorcerers born in this era were so strong that they would later be revived during the Culling Game. Their overwhelming power is the reason this period earned the name the Golden Age of Sorcery. The spread of Buddhism during the Heian era has a clear parallel in Jujutsu Kaisen, through Tengen, who brought the foundations of Jujutsu to Japan and openly taught its principles to others. This marked the beginning of organized Jujutsu society and allowed techniques to develop and spread more widely. Over time, this created a surge of advanced curse techniques and gave rise to many of the strongest sorcerers in the series, all tracing their origins back to the Heian era. As Jujutsu continued to develop, power started concentrating in certain families. These were the families that inherited strong curse techniques, and over time, they turned that inheritance into authority. Bloodlines became important, techniques stayed within the family, and control was passed down through generations. This is how the great clans began to form. During the Heian era, several factions played major roles in shaping Jujutsu society and producing the sorcerers we hear about later. Even so, it's important to note that none of these clans were the big three that dominate modern Jujutsu society. The power structure back then looked very different, and the clans that mattered most during the Heian era don't always line up with the ones that matter now. One of the earliest important families was the Sugawara clan. The clan takes its name from its founder, Sugawara no Furuhito. Later on, the clan would be headed by Michizane no Sugawara, one of Japan's three great vengeful spirits. He was a real historical figure who lived during the Heian era and held significant influence during his lifetime. After the Heian era ended, during the Meiji Restoration, the Sugawara clan split into 6 different branches. One of those branches eventually became the Gojo clan, which makes Michizane the ancestor of both Satoru Gojo and Yuto Katsu. During the Heian era itself, the Sugawara clan took part in an offensive against Uraume and Sukuna, working together with the Abbe clan. The attempt failed, but even so, the fact that they were involved at all shows that the Sugawara were viewed as a clan with influence and standing during that time. The most dominant and politically important clan of the Heian era was the Fujiwara clan. In real Japanese history, the Fujiwara were a powerful noble family that controlled much of the country's political system during this period. They secured a hereditary claim to the position of regent and frequently provided consorts for the emperor. Because of that, Fujiwara clan heads often ended up as fathers-in-law or grandfathers-in-law to the emperor himself. This political dominance reached its height under Fujiwara no Michinaga. His influence was so overwhelming that he effectively ruled Japan during his lifetime, even though the emperor still existed in name. In the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, this suggests that the central government during the Heian era was aware of jiu-jitsu and recognized Sukuna as a major threat. The Fujiwara wanted control over powerful individuals, but they did not possess the raw jiu-jitsu strength needed to overpower someone like Sukuna. Instead, they handled it by trying to keep things contained through politics. When brute force wasn't an option, they offered government positions to dangerous sorcerers to keep them satisfied and manageable, which is exactly what happened with Yorozu. The Fujiwara also strengthened their position by hiring outside fighters. This included groups like the Sun, Moon, and Star Squad led by Uraume, as well as the 5 empty generals. These groups worked for the Fujiwara and carried out their orders, but they were never true members of the clan itself. Beyond the Sugawara and the Fujiwara, the only other clans we know for certain existed during the Heian era are the Abbe clan and the Kamo clan. In Jujutsu Kaisen, the Abbe clan is the family that Angel belongs to. Their top team was the Deshi Pacification Squad, made up of Angel and the leftover members of the Sugawara clan. At one point, they tried to take down Sukuna, but the King of Curses easily pushed them back. Meanwhile, the Kamo clan rose to prominence during the Heian era as Onmyoji, or those specialized in a blend of divination, astronomy, and magic. This earned the clan a strong reputation among sorcerers. They're best known for their inherited blood manipulation technique, which lets users control their blood shape, movement, and properties, both inside and outside the body. It's a flexible ability that works for fast, long-range attacks and boosting physical strength in close combat. Members of the Kamo clan stick to a very old-school way of thinking, putting a lot of weight on bloodlines, customs, and doing things by the book. Because of this, they later became closely aligned with Jujutsu headquarters and higher-ups. In modern times, they are regarded as one of the big 3 families alongside the Gojo and the Zenin clans. The Kamo clan, however, carries a permanent stain on its history. During the Meiji era, the clan produced Noritoshi Kamo, a name that became tied to extreme cruelty, but the horrific crimes attributed to him, including the creation of the cursed womb, death paintings, were not actually his own doing. These acts were committed by Kinjaku, who had taken control of Noritoshi's body. While using him as a vessel, Kinjaku quietly seized control of the Kamo clan and replaced its leadership without anyone realizing what had happened. As for clans like the Zenin and Inumaki, there were no real-world equivalents tied to the Heian era. As far as we can tell, these families were created entirely for the world of Jujutsu Kaisen and don't trace their roots back to this period. There are 6 sorcerers we know for sure who come from the Heian era, or are closely tied to it. If we include Tengen, that number goes up to 7, even though Tengen technically existed before the era began. Among all of them, one name sits at the center of almost everything that follows: Kinjaku. Even though Kinjaku plays a massive role in the story, we still don't know exactly what he was doing during the Heian era itself. What we do know is that he was already shaping the future of Jujutsu behind the scenes and pushing its development forward. The reason Kinjaku is still around after more than 1,000 years comes down to his cursed technique, brain transplant. It allows him to remove his own brain and implant it into another body, even if that body is already dead. Once the transfer is complete, a stitch scar appears across the forehead that can never be healed due to a binding vow. It's the only visible sign that the person isn't who they're supposed to be. After taking over a body, Kinjaku gains full access to a host's cursed energy, innate cursed techniques, and even their memories. So he becomes the person completely. His imitation is so perfect that even the 6 Eyes fails to identify him as an imposter. That level of infiltration explains how he survived across centuries, moving from body to body and quietly inserting himself into major moments in Jujutsu history. His long-term goal has never changed. He wants to force the evolution of humanity by merging every human in Japan with Master Tengen. Through that merger, he believes humanity can reach a new stage of existence built around cursed energy. The Culling game exists solely to make this plan possible. Over multiple generations, Kinjaku recruited sorcerers from different eras and promised them reincarnation as a second chance of life. He's able to do this because he's the only known sorcerer who can turn humans into cursed objects after death. That single ability allowed him to stock the Culling game with fighters from across history, including many from the Heian era. At another point in history, he transplanted his brain into the body of Noritoshi Kamo. While using that body, he carried out a series of horrific experiments that resulted in the creation of the cursed womb death paintings. These crimes permanently stained the Kamo clan's name, even though the real Noritoshi Kamo was never the one in control. One of Kinjaku's more personal actions came later, when he transplanted his brain into Kaori, the partner of Jin Itadori. While using her body, he gave birth to Yuji Itadori, deliberately creating him to serve as a vessel for Sukuna. After Suguro Geto dies, Kinjaku takes over his body as well. This gives him access to all of Geto's memories. combat experience, and jujutsu knowledge, along with Geto's curse techniques. Because of his constant body hopping, Kinjaku can retain innate curse techniques from previous vessels in addition to his own. This includes Geto's curse spirit manipulation and Kari's anti-gravity system. There is a limit to how many techniques he can maintain at once, usually around 3 to 4 total, but even that puts him far outside the norm. Most sorcerers are bound to a single innate technique for their entire lives. Kinjaku gets to mix and match abilities across centuries. That freedom is exactly why he's become the mastermind behind both the Shibuya incident and the Culling game. Everything happening in the present traces back to plans he started putting together long before the modern era ever began. Uraume. Uraume serves as Sukuna's personal attendant, handling everything he needs, from preparing meals to drawing baths to delivering items. Out of everyone around him, Uraume is one of the very few people Sukuna actually shows concern for. By the end of the series, their relationship comes across as having a strong parent-child dynamic, especially when you look at how closely Uraume watches over Sukuna and prioritizes his well-being in every situation. A big reason Uraume is so valuable comes down to their curse technique, ice formation. This ability manifested when Uraume was still young and resulted in him accidentally freezing their own parents to death while asleep. Ice formation allows Uraume to create ice in both small and massive quantities with ease. One of his most recognizable attacks involves exhaling a freezing mist that instantly solidifies into towering ice pillars, trapping enemies in a place and wiping out entire squads within seconds. He can also create enormous spiked ice formations and control them as they float through the air. Sukuna first finds Uraume alone in the wilderness, surrounded by frozen corpses. After hearing what happened, Sukuna takes Uraume in and gives him a role of preparing food and preserving human meat, effectively replacing the ice storage methods he once relied on. Over time, Uraume becomes extremely skilled at preparing human flesh exactly to Sukuna's taste, further cementing his role at Sukuna's side. In the modern era, Uraume reincarnates through the body of a woman named Shiori Hime and aligns himself with Kinjaku. He plays an active role during the Shibuya incident and remains involved throughout the Culling game. During the final showdown, where the remaining Jujutsu sorcerers try to take down Sukuna, Kenji Hikari intercepts Uraume and traps him inside his domain to keep him away from Sukuna. Once Sukuna is finally defeated, Uraume uses his own technique to cut through his neck before his body withers away. Yorozu. Yorozu is a sorcerer from the Heian era who builds her entire fighting style around construction curse technique. This ability allows her to create tools, weapons, and materials as long as she understands their structure and composition. She can reproduce nearly anything, with the exception of special grade cursed tools. The major drawback is that construction consumes cursed energy at an extremely high rate compared to most techniques. One of Yorozu's most impressive creations is a unique liquid metal that she manipulates using semi-autonomous cursed energy. Over time, she takes inspiration from insects and develops armor made from this liquid metal that mimics insect traits. Using this armor, she defeats the 5 empty generals of the Fujiwara clan, earns recognition, and secures an official position within the Heian capital. Later on, Yorozu accepts Kinjaku's offer to participate in the Culling game and willingly turns herself into a cursed object. That cursed object is then ingested by Sumiki Fushiguro, Megumi's sister, who is already marked by Kinjaku. This move plays directly into Kinjaku's plan to pull Megumi and Yuji deeper into the Culling game and create the conditions needed for Sukuna to take over Megumi's body. When Megumi reunites with Sumiki, he quickly realizes something is wrong as her behavior and memories no longer line up. Yorozu reveals herself and becomes fixated on Sukuna after sensing his presence within Yuji. She leaves and settles in the Sendai colony, choosing a football stadium as her base while waiting with Kinjaku's help. Sukuna eventually arrives and their fight begins. Yorozu's goal is to kill Sukuna as her warped expression of love, while Sukuna intends to kill her in a way that completely crushes Megumi's soul through guilt. Yorozu unleashes everything she has, including her domain expansion, Threefold Affliction. The domain is filled with organic insect-like structures floating throughout the space, and its sheer hit effect supports her ultimate attack, the True Sphere. The True Sphere is something that should be impossible to create, but Yorozu manages it through her liquid metal. The sphere has no surface contact area, generating infinite pressure that makes it untouchable and guarantees destruction on impact. Even so, Sukuna overwhelms her without relying on his own techniques, using only Megumi's 10 Shadows technique. As Yorozu dies, she forms a binding vow to construct a replica of Kamutoke, a cursed tool Sukuna once used thousands of years earlier. She leaves it behind as a final offering, bringing her twisted devotion to an end. Uro. Uro plays a smaller role compared to the other major figures of the Heian era, but her background still matters. She once served as a captain of the Sun, Moon, and Star Squad, an assassin group connected to the Fujiwara clan. Her life takes a sharp turn when a man from the clan gives her a name, then immediately betrays her. After killing another member of his own family, he frames Uro for the crime, which leads to her being sentenced to death. Jumping forward to the modern era, Kinjaku incarnates Uro and places her directly into the culling game, where she eventually accumulates 70 points in the Sendai colony. Her curse technique, sky manipulation, turns her into one of the 4 players locked in a stalemate where none of them can easily overpower the others. Sky manipulation allows her to treat the sky as a physical surface. She can grab and move the surrounding atmosphere as if it were a solid sheet, bending and warping it however she wants. This lets her float freely, wrap the sky around herself like clothing, and maintain constant movement and defense at the same time. During combat, she uses the warp sky to twist incoming attacks, making them miss, bend away, or lose force before they reach her. But there is a clear limitation to the technique. The surface she controls cannot directly crush her opponents. To get around this, she uses an extension technique called Thin Icebreaker. She shatters the surface of the sky like fragile ice, then sends a focused shockwave through the break that slips past defenses and lands clean hits. All of this shows during her fight against Yuta. Angel. Angel originates from the Heian era as a member of the Deshi Pacification Squad. This group belonged to the Abbe clan and was reinforced with what remained of the Sugawara clan. Their mission was to eliminate Sukuna, but the attempt completely failed. Sukuna repelled the entire squad, and Angel survived with a hatred for him that endured for over 1,000 years. Like many ancient sorcerers, Angel eventually accepts Kinjaku's offer to incarnate in the future. When she returns, she inhabits the body of a young girl named Hana Kurusu. Instead of fully taking over, Angel shares the body with Hana. Hana remains in control most of the time, creating a rare symbiotic relationship between the two. Angel's curse technique extinguishment, erases any curse technique it comes into contact with. This includes barriers, seals, cursed objects, and even special grade tools like the prison realm. Her extension technique, Jacob's Ladder, summons a glowing floor-wing trumpet that releases a massive column of purifying light. Anything cursed caught within that light is destroyed, making it the most dangerous anti-curse abilities in the series. When Angel meets Megami's group, she explains her objective clearly. She wants every incarnated sorcerer eliminated because she views the possession of human bodies as a violation of divine law. She agrees to unseal Gojo, but only after Sukuna is dealt with. Once Sukuna takes control of Megami's body, Angel recognizes him immediately. The situation becomes heavier because Hana has feelings for Megami after he saved her during her childhood. They fire Jacob's Ladder at full output in an attempt to tear Sukuna out, but Sukuna pretends to be Megami, tricks Hana, and brutally injures both of them before throwing them off a rooftop. Hana survives after getting medical treatment, and later she finishes the unsealing ritual at Jujutsu High to finally free Gojo from the prison realm. Tengen. Tengen technically comes from before the Heian era, but they're a big reason the golden age of Jujutsu even happened in the first place. Tengen spread the earliest Jujutsu teachings and helped shape an environment where sorcery could grow into something more organized and widely practiced. Even though their exact actions during the era aren't fully documented, their influence is all over the place once the Heian era gets going. Tengen is best known for barrier techniques. They are considered the greatest barrier user in Jujutsu history, and their work shaped the entire country. By placing massive barriers across Japan, Tengen helped suppress cursed spirits and stabilize the flow of cursed energy. That stability made it possible for stronger sorcerers to emerge and survive, which directly feeds into why the Heian era became known as the Golden Age. Over the next 300 years, that knowledge spreads and evolves, eventually producing the legendary sorcerers associated with the period. The Heian era itself lasts around 400 years, yet figures like Kinjaku and Sukuna are described as being around 1,000 years old. That gap leaves several centuries outside the era, making Tengen the connecting thread that ties everything together across generations. Tengen's innate curse technique is immortality. This ability allows them to live indefinitely, but it does not stop the aging process. Their body continues to change over time and it slowly loses its human form. To prevent that, Tengen must merge with a star plasma vessel every 500 years in order to preserve their humanity. If that merger fails, Tengen continues evolving and moves closer to becoming a cursed spirit. In 2006, Tengen failed to merge with a star plasma vessel when the supposed vessel was assassinated. As a result, they evolve into something far closer to a cursed spirit than a human. Even so, they retain their self-awareness through sheer willpower and constant use of barriers, allowing them to stay conscious and rational despite the transformation. Tengen is not a combat-focused sorcerer and does not fight directly. When Kinjaku sets the culling game in motion and begins preparing for the Great Merger, Tengen asks for protection from powerful sorcerers. Even without fighting themselves, Tengen still contributes in critical moments. During the battle against Kinjaku, they assist Yuki Tsukumo and Choso by manipulating empty barriers and creating openings. These actions serve as distractions and support, giving the fighters every possible edge they can get. And that finally brings us to the man everyone was after, Uraume Sukuna. He's the strongest sorcerer of his era, and probably of all time, and he played a massive role during the Heian era. How massive? Hard to say exactly. What we do know is that he was opposed to Japan's central government for reasons that aren't fully clear, though ideology seems like the main factor. Being the strongest, Sukuna refused to bow to anyone. He lived on his own terms, without rules or morality, taking whatever he wanted and doing as he pleased. His brutality and skill earned him the nickname the Disgraced One. Nobody from that era could put him down. His sheer strength and cruelty made him the ultimate threat long before curses existed the way we know them today. The only person he seemed close to was Uraume, since he cared for him even in death. Sukuna also had some connection to Kinjaku, who preserved his life through cursed objects, specifically Sukuna's fingers. Kinjaku later helped set up a vessel for Sukuna in the culling game. Besides those two, everyone else from the Heian era was just an opponent. Uro, Angel, and Yorozu all challenged him and all lost. Once Sukuna revives inside Yuji, even at a fraction of his full power, he immediately sets himself apart. His curse energy alone is massive, enough to overwhelm entire generations of sorcerers and curse users, and that raw power feeds directly into Shrine, his innate technique built around slicing and fire-based destruction. With Shrine, he uses Dismantle as a ranged slash that cuts through almost anything, while Cleave adjusts itself to be the toughness of whatever it hits, letting him scale his damage effortlessly. From there, he can expand Cleave into larger attacks, like Spiderweb, spreading destruction across a wide area. And when he chants Open, he releases his Divine Flame, which burns faster and hotter than most techniques can handle. All of this comes together in Malevolent Shrine, his domain expansion. Instead of pulling enemies into a sealed space, Sukuna pushes his domain straight into the real world, massively increasing its range. By opening the barrier through a binding vow, he boosts the power of his slashes even further, turning the entire area into a kill zone where anything caught inside gets torn apart automatically. As Sukuna gathers fingers through Yuji, he becomes obsessed with Megumi's 10 Shadows technique and eventually takes over his body during the culling game, gaining access to Shikigami like Mahoraga, and using its adaptation to evolve his slashing technique, which ultimately lets him defeat Gojo at a huge cost. After that, non-stop battles against the remaining Jujutsu sorcerers wear him down, especially as Yuji keeps landing black flashes and awakening powers Sukuna himself originally influenced. In the end, Yuji's soul-targeting domain expansion, Megumi's rejection, and Nobara's resonance combined to put an end to the King of Curses, who have terrorized the Jujutsu world since the Heian era. The story of the Heian era comes together like this. At some point during that time, Tengen brought the foundations of Jujutsu to Japan. That kicked off the golden age of Jujutsu, producing tons of strong sorcerers and a bunch of advanced techniques. The Fujiwara clan, running the central government, wanted to keep their grip on power, but felt threatened by this new force. They weren't strong enough to challenge someone like Sukuna or even Yorozu. After Yorozu went on a rampage, the government gave her a luxurious position to keep her satisfied and under control. The Fujiwara also tried to take down Sukuna, but they failed. Even with the Sun, Moon, and Star Squad, and the Sugawara and Abbe clans helping, nothing worked. After that, Sukuna basically becomes a roaming warlord, taking whatever he wanted because no one could stop him. At some point, he teamed up with Kinjaku to preserve his own life and learn how to transfer himself into cursed objects, setting up his later reincarnation. Meanwhile, Kinjaku was making contracts so people could be reincarnated into the culling game. Yorozu and Uro came back to fight again. Angel returned to get revenge on Sukuna, and Uraume also agreed to a binding vow. Her awakening happened much earlier, before the culling game started, to support Sukuna when he returned. The Heian era wraps up with the collapse of the Fujiwara clan, the capital moving from Kyoto to Tokyo, and the first shogun taking power. We don't have every detail, but what we do know gives a rich backdrop for the world of Jujutsu Kaisen and sets the stage for everything that comes after.